Okay, and hello everybody, and thank you for coming back to the Black Box Podcast. This is going to be part 3 of the Zodiac killer Louis Meyers. And I've been exploring this case for a while now. I actually first found out about the Louis Meyers case in 2016, and I had always thought that it had first been reported in 2014 because all of the articles are dated at 2014, but I overlooked a major piece of evidence, and that is that the confession that occurred between Louis Meyers and Randy Kenny was actually in 2002, but it's just this guy had a deathbed confession of the Zodiac killer, he says, and nobody would take him seriously. They just sort of refused to listen. So it actually took 12 years for him to get monumental mainstream attention. And again, that's just pure hearsay. Keep in mind, though, that we do have two people saying the same thing that Louis Meyers confessed to them. The other, Robert Robitaille. No, I'm mispronouncing his name. Yes, but as I mentioned, though, about this guy, Bob, as he goes by, he's on all over the internet. You can find some interviews with him where he states the same thing that Randy Kenny proposed. In 1976, Louis Meyers confessed that he was the Zodiac killer to him. And just a few things that I've been finding recently about the Zodiac. I've been looking at the photo comparisons of the sketch, and I said in the first part of the podcast I didn't think we would find a lot in the sketch of the Zodiac killer. And I've been just reviewing it, though, just to see if there's something there. I've been comparing the photo of Louis Meyers to that of the Zodiac killer, and I'm finding a lot more similarities that I noticed the first time. I really think that the nose is very similar. The lips are extraordinarily similar. It's almost like the same pair of lips, 100%. The jawline, the chin, are all spot on. These are very distinct features that look exactly the same to me in comparison of Louis Meyers and the Zodiac sketch. And the left ear, I feel, is very similar, and the right ear appears quite different to me. One of the most notable things, though, with the sketch is, take it for what you will, but the sketch of the Zodiac killer has a widow's peak, where the hairline is sort of receding inward, and then it comes to a point in the center. And I see nothing of that here in Louis Meyers, and they really were very. But when they say they, I mean like the detectives in the old interviews were saying that you need to look out for somebody who has this sort of hairline in the suspects. And I don't really know what to say about that. That could be nothing at all. That could just be, a mistake, or it could be something that is a very key piece of evidence that would push you one way or the other about Louis Meyers. There's another thing that I want to talk about that I think is much more fascinating than hairlines, and that is Randy Kenny himself. This guy received the deathbed confession in 2002, and there's just something that I was always kind of wondering. Why didn't this guy, did Louis Meyers pass away 30 minutes after he confessed to Randy Kenny? Just no recording, no tape recorder, no video recorder. All of that was possible at any time in 2002, any time in the new millennium. It's like if somebody tells you that they're the Zodiac killer and they want you to tell the whole world, just no recording. It's just like you're not going to get any sort of hard evidence, or he's not going to give you any more vital information that you could use to prove your case. And that is something that is really kind of fishy. It's just kind of bizarre, and I don't really have a positive answer for it as to why that is. And it really depends on how we determine the interpretation of a lack of evidence. I just want to know. It's like if you're on your deathbed and you're trying to confess to somebody that you were the Zodiac killer, and you're saying the message, write a book about this and give the money to the victims' families. Wouldn't you tell them more? Wouldn't you give people a much larger pile of evidence to work with? We're talking about, oh yeah, by the way, that secret code in the ciphers, this is what it is. Or wouldn't you say, like, oh yeah, by the way, that piece of evidence that they're looking for, I buried it in X marks the spot. Or just give some more precise information, period, about how the Zodiac killer functioned. Granted, though, on the other hand, I thought that the Louis Meyers case really has maybe the largest pile of hard evidence out of all of them. And that's really, I mean, maybe some people are just going to blow up in flames when I say that, but the dates match up. Um, he has direct connections to the victims. There's a plausible theory as to, like, why he developed this motive, like the motive that was behind the murders, and all the things kind of match up. Also, how he got the military grade boot print at the crime scene before he was in the army. That whole thing about working in a surplus store, or his father working with the Navy. All of these things sort of come together with Myers. Yet, on the other hand, we don't have a lot of descriptions of the ciphers. Furthermore, we have a 17-year-old being the Zodiac killer. Moreover, Randy Kenny has a deathbed confession, but no hard evidence. And keep in mind, though, it's just like there are so many other people that are writing books on the Zodiac case, and I mentioned that I did my first Zodiac upload on Lyndon Lafferty, who wrote a book as well about a guy named George Russell Tucker, pseudonym, and nobody outside of the Lafferty circle thinks that Tucker was the Zodiac killer. So, again, is that just someone trying to promote their own name and trying to sell copies of a book? We don't know, and there are quite a few of those out there, very sadly, because, you'd hope that if somebody is going to go, if you want to write a book and try and make money, I mean, call it fiction or something if you're not going to tell the truth, but that's not the world that we live in. Getting back to Myers, one of the other pieces of evidence that someone states, Randy Kenny says, the cross at the end of the Zodiac messages, the sign of the Zodiac, if you will, is actually a Celtic cross, because Louis Meyers was very proud of his Scottish heritage. This was another thing that drew me to this case and this particular suspect, because that is something that I thought of from the very beginning. That a lot of people thought that this was actually representing the scope of a rifle. No, I thought it was a Celtic cross, and either that or the Earth cross. And yeah, so then I think that as well would also sort of fit the profile of a teenager who is, passionate about their sort of heritage. And again, I've put some more thought into it. I think it is plausible that a 17-year-old could create ciphers like that. I don't see really any possibility that any reason why you would completely deny a 17-year-old. Do I think that the Zodiac actually killed 37 people? Highly improbable. Keep in mind, we can't prove or disprove any of that. No, especially if it were Louis Meyers, I don't think he would have killed 37 people, and especially when you give Randy Kenny's account that one person was murdered purely for drug money, and everything in the Randy Kenny story and the Louis Meyers story seems to have an explanation, with the exception of the ciphers, and I think there's a lot to say for that. It's not just sort of like these whole things about, well, he did work at a newspaper, and they folded the newspaper into three pieces the day that the Zodiac killer sent three letters. What does that mean? Stuff from the Richard Gaikowski case. That's so open-ended. There could be a perfectly plausible explanation behind that. I mean, so much guesswork. But with the Louis Meyers case, we do have a few more solid things, like his direct connections to Darlene Ferrin, as well as the other murder victims that he went to high school with. And there is very valuable because it shows that it's not picking at straws. He actually could be a major person of interest. And I do think there's also a possibility that a lot of the original investigators and the people who were researching this from an early age really just did not want to admit that they overlooked somebody, much less a 17-year-old. I could totally. That's just a gut feeling, that a lot of the investigators were just completely dismissing this, saying this is impossible. Maybe they don't want to admit that they would have overlooked that a 17-year-old was the Zodiac killer and that they were just sort of duped by a teenager rather than some 30-year-old criminal psycho mastermind psychopath. However, that is not to say with certainty that Louis Meyers was the Zodiac killer. I just wanted to add, though, like the things that we've mentioned today in recap, quite a lot of Louis Meyers' features actually match up very, very closely with the Zodiac sketch. You can take that for what you expect, but that's one thing. And the other thing that kind of works against the Meyers case, though, is why wasn't the confession recorded? I mean, why didn't Randy Kennedy just be like, "You're the Zodiac killer? I'll be back with a tape recorder in 30 minutes," like, that would be my first reaction. I mean, we're talking anything at all that would help, document this massive, monumental find. Like, seriously, Lou, you're the Zodiac killer? Well, I'm going to be back with a video camera as soon as I can, and we're going to film this whole thing. Tell me everything that happened. But, like, I'm not Randy Kenny. I don't know how he thinks, and, I don't really know. Like, you can't put yourself into the shoes of another person, really. However, at the same time, though, there's no document of the confession. We have two people, Bob and Randy, who are saying, though, that this guy did confess to them. He was out of the country at the time that there was a hiatus of Zodiac activity. He was in the San Francisco Bay Area from 1965 to 1971, with direct connections to the victims, with direct connections to military boots and gear, and furthermore, there's also motive. Like, it's a very teenager-like motive, jealousy and revenge and rage and, going after somebody because they're with the girl that you want, and things are kind of on the fence now. But what do you think? I would love to hear about it, and as always, you just leave a comment, share anything. I want to hear.